Sir, you're on mute.
How do I?
Sir, if we can just test your audio, or are you presenting anything today?
No. What I wanted to present is at the background, so I don't think I need anything more. That is it.
Okay. Okay. So Anita is in another session is ongoing as of now. So once it's done, we'll go live. So,
No problem. No problem.
it will take some time, and we'll let you know once the session is going to be going. It will take maybe another 5 minutes,
So
5 to 10 minutes.
no problem. No problem.
Thank you.
ગરમી જે બકા કે એસી નું કરાય પાછા જે છે પેલો
Sir, sir, just an update. Sir, just an update.
I can hear you. Yes.
Sir, once Anita joins the call, she will introduce you first to the viewers, and then she'll give you the cue to start, and then you can start your talks.
Okay.
Just wanted you to know how it is.
Okay, no problem.
Okay.
Yes, ma'am.
हेलो गुड इवनिंग सर, कैसे हैं आप?
Thank you. Can you just send a message if you don't mind?
यस प्लीज, विल गो लाइव इन 1 minute.
Okay, no problem. There, it's sorted. So what's the kind of audience that we have in terms of numbers?
Around 2,500.
Actually, 2000, I was expecting 20, 25 people. So
No,
actually have that
at
kind.
any time that's the minimum number we have. Yeah.
Okay.
At some point yesterday we had close to 4,000. I think the virtual platform has helped us in that way, reaching out to a larger audience.
In India, the audience
We
does
are
not
live in
exist.
5 seconds.
Okay, cool.
Okay. Good evening, everybody, and welcome to the next session at the Ahmedabad Design Week 2.0. Today we have with us Mr. Sameer Shukla from the Gujarat University. He is an architect graduate of the CEPT Ahmedabad and a professor at Gujarat University Design Academy, working with innovation in core structures. He is also a visiting faculty at the Indian Institute of Management Ahmedabad and National Institute of Design in Ahmedabad. Mr. Shukla is the initiator and honorable CEO of Gujarat University Consultancy Cell and Defense and Homeland Security Research Cell. He is a published author and also shares his insights through regular columns in the print and digital media. Please welcome Mr. Sameer Shukla.
Thank you. So that's the time for me to go live?
Yes, sir, we are
okay.
live.
So I guess, okay, thank you very much. So I believe that I've not really been following the, what has happened over 2-3 days, but I'm sure that all of you are now well entrenched into understanding toy design and all the nuances that are connected to it. So the subject that I'm going to touch upon is not really, I think I'm going to kind of widen the envelope, because for me, toys have a very deeper meaning, very cultural meaning, and hence my theme is slightly wider. So if you read the title, I would try saying Design for India and Design for Indians. Now, Design for India is a very, very tricky statement, because obviously we have a lot of issue about what is India, and some amount of confusions have been now rife. So I have a very simple way of looking at what we call India, and that's a geographical map. So this is one map, which is behind me. I'm sure you can see it. Is that I want in every designer's cabin in India, because I'm connected to this field since 30 years, and I've seen the kind of things that we have been designing, the kind of stuff that we have been, aspiring to, bring to India, and the peer group of design, the design peers that we have. And when I look at them, I understand that this map that is right behind me is missing. So the first thing that I want you to understand that what this map means. I'm sure that you have understood that it has got a very simple, connotation. It's a world map with 2 horizontal lines, which are kind of lines which are depicting the width of India. But if you're a climate guy, if you're a geographist, if you're an environmentalist, if you understand the way this planet works, then this becomes very, very interesting to look at, because these are the 2 lines that are defining all the other regions in the world that are similar to us. And, I'm sure when I look at this table, I've got this cup of coffee and then some sanitizer. I've got an iPhone also. And anything that I see on my table has come from the part, the origins are from the part of the world which are outside these two boundaries. So if you look at all the design aspirations that we have, all the great things that we borrow from, none of them are from the nations that fall in this two lines. The entire Europe is outside it. The United States of America is outside it. Some part of China is outside and inside it, but that we'll talk about a bit later. But honestly speaking, this is one of the craziest realities of India, that modern India has failed completely in understanding what it is. And what it is a very, very important aspect for all of us to go back to now, not in the conventional sense of, this nationalism, etc., that is rising, but in terms of the bigger picture about this climate, about this planet. So if you look at the other nations that are aligned with us, they all look very like there's Mexico and there's all this Saharan Africa, some part of, Indonesia and Thailand and Arabia is there. None of them are developed countries, other than maybe parts of Arabia, which has got oil-rich nations. So it's a very, honestly speaking, third world countries that are found in this belt. You just go back by 500 years, 1,000 years, and then suddenly you have a completely different understanding of the world. The nations between these lines were the richest nations to exist on this planet. All the major ancient civilizations that you see Egypt, you see South American civilizations, you see Mesopotamia, you see maybe Angkor Wat or those kind of massive things that have happened across the world. All the great things happened in between these two lines. And the reason why it happened that way is because these lines in the middle of India, what is passing is called tropic. And these are the tropical nations. And by them being tropical nations, one very, very interesting aspect that they all possess is that they have a very different kind of climatic condition, a very different kind of weather than those nations that are outside these two boundaries. So the reason why great civilizations rose in this band that is currently virtually a desert band, because if you look at thanks to Sahara that has appeared very recently. Sahara is not a very old desert. It has happened maybe 1 lakh year back. This is a very barren patch of the world that it looks like today. But if you go back, and when the tropics were really prospering, as they are prospering in India even today, is that these are the regions where you have seasons. These are the regions which are very dramatic. You have very defined monsoon, you have very defined summer, you have very defined winter, and you have crops that are happening across the year. Different kind of crops happen. That's why these areas have different kind of festivals. They are the most vibrant places that this planet ever saw. So if you don't read the modern history, and if you go back to the ancient history of not just India but the world, there is one very clear distinction that we have to recognize today, that these are the lands of great civilizations. Now, how does it matter when we talk about toys or some kind of design processes that you are part of a civilization? See, design is one of the most cultural constructs that this planet saw. Design was something that was very unique to people of each area. And that is why, we kind of prefer to call it craft. But you go to most of these localities, local regions, you see very strong aesthetics, you see very strong attitude towards certain, environmental factors that these designs are responding to. And if you look at the modern designing is not really responding to the kind of conditions that the ancient designing was responding to. The reason behind this is something that is maybe the most glamorous part of modern history, and probably the darkest hour of humanity. That is what I look at it. Maybe 1,000 years down the line, it could be looked at that way. That something very dramatic happened on this planet. all these ancient cultures were suddenly pressurized by a completely new idea, a renaissance that happened in a geographical region called Europe. Now, the renaissance is obviously very dramatic. All of us who are designing, you would be we look at that as a rise of the reason, and we feel that that is the point at which humanity has really, broken into a new dawn, and that's why it is called Renaissance. But in reality, Renaissance was not exactly a rise of a new kind of thinking. Renaissance coincided with something that is called industrial revolution in a certain way. People prefer to believe that Renaissance happened first, in industrial revolution happened after that. But in reality, both of them happened simultaneously because both of them are completely dependent on each other. So you have this ancient world where these civilizations were around for thousands of years. India had a continuous civilization, 2000 years at least. China also had something like that. South America had also similar kind of civilizations. Africa, we don't really look at the history very carefully. Nigeria is a massive country. Mali is a massive country. Chad is a massive country. Enormous amount of cultural depth and civilizations existed, and they all were suddenly not obliterated but occupied by a new idea. The new idea was colonizing the world by people who thought that they are thinking people. So colonization is a process that is not an intellectual process. Colonization is a process that is an economic process. So if we really look at the history of Europe and maybe history of design also in that sense, history of Europe, if you look at ancient people, then they are not very, they have kings and they have peasants. You don't have too many distinctions. Like if you go to India or China, you have various classes of people involved in different kind of activities. Because the civilizations had lasted for a very long time. But if you look at Europe, it was predominantly farming people and a king above it or a baron above it or something like that. And people were living in a climate that had certain challenges of their own. People were maybe not as prosperous as tropics because the seasons were not as favorable. In India, you can have 3 crops. In Europe, you cannot because the climatical conditions don't provide for it. Whatever could be the reason, but the technological rise happened in Europe. And the technological rise that happened, it looks like a very unique phenomena to us. We prefer to think that maybe, people like us, we're not Indians, we're not thinking people. And that's why the Renaissance happened there and not here. But probably as we go and understand this issue better, we start realizing that maybe there are a different kind of Renaissance that was existing on this planet prior to the European Renaissance that happened. So with the industrialization, something terrible happened. That was that human beings could start making things that they don't need. Now, it sounds a bit strange to look at Renaissance in this sense, but if you really look at practically the entire modern lifestyle around us, the basic necessities are a very small part of the design things that we use, the products that we use. A large amount of our life currently is completely crowded with things that we don't need. And the fact that these things are around us and that these things are really percolated every dimension of life on earth at this point in time is because of this phenomena called industrial revolution, where machines arrived and human beings could completely change the way large manufacturing took place. Now, when we look at this industrialization that is machine driven, we always feel that obviously it's a great idea. Humanity, but today everybody can have a car. Because we have Second World War having taken place and all the industrial revolution got amplified because of the war-like conditions, and we could make things, machines very rapidly. Today we have a situation where everybody can have a car. So that's the kind of power of machines. That is the kind of scale of economy that they provide. So the normal debate is that obviously that's a great idea, and in past something like that had not happened. But obviously all of us know that India had a very large economy in ancient times also. So what was happening at that point in time, where production could still be mass produced and still not be having the kind of horrific results that machine-driven industrialization has come up. So if you look at any port town of India, India was the largest exporter of the world. Practically everything the world was using, a large part of it was made in India. And that made in India was possible because we have urban structure around all the port areas where you have communities of craftspeople staying together. It sounds currently a bit strange that when we prefer to call it casteist, or we prefer to call it backward, but we have very large community driven divisions in cities, and that was because that was harnessing the economy of scale of manufacturing, but using human labor. It was not whatever scale of economy that could be achieved with that was a scale of economy that had a very different quality than the machine-driven scale of economics. So if you really look at the machine-driven scale of economics, what happens is that it is far faster than the natural processes of the planet. So currently, we can make things which we don't need at a scale where we have to start exploiting the planet beyond all the reasonable requirements. And that is because we have now this awareness that has dawned upon us. This mass production was glamorized. It was something that was supposed to be looked at as the power of humanity. And by humanity, you mean the colonizers, which were using this entire world as a market. So they started something that they were forced to start because they had started a furnace. So industrial revolution that happened is a furnace that this planet is even suffering today. It means that you have to keep pouring resources to keep allowing this economy to self-sustain. And they had to start going across the world. They were brave, adventurous people, that is given. But the fact that they had to move out was because they wanted to feed these massive industrial revolutions potential. And what it led to was first a direct colonization, that they occupied a lot of landmass so that they can draw resources from that for manufacturing. And obviously, if you go to recent history in say last 50 years, we are made to believe that colonization has ended. It has continued in the worst possible form because all the ancient civilizations that were colonized and brutalized and exploited directly by occupation, they were all vacated. They were not vacated because the Industrial Revolution wanted to, it cherished the idea of freedom. But the Industrial Revolution allowed these nations to reach such an economy of scale that they can do economic exploitation of the nations without even occupying. So as long occupying was beneficial idea, they occupied. And when they did not need to occupy, they left. But at this point in time, where we stand today, we are an occupied nation because we are driven by the economy of the developed world. They are our peers. They are the ones which are deciding
Sameer sir, Sameer sir, You are on mute.
So I spoke for all this while with mute on.
No, last 10 seconds.
Okay, so that's thank you for reminding me. Anyways, so I would say that when I talk about recommending that idea, not just for India, but I'm recommending to every nation in the world. Every nation should design for itself. So Nigeria should design for Nigeria, and Mexico should design for Mexico, and Australia should design for Australia. And why? The reason why is that we are living on a very, very dynamic planet with its own forces that are extremely local. We cannot be locality agnostic on this planet without damaging the planet. And let's understand how. So, we all understand the idea is taking place. There is an idea of ecology that we are not really that conversant with. So what is an ecology? Ecology is a closed environment where natural resources are available in a constrained manner. Sunlight is arriving, and life forms are evolved around that that source of energy that is available. So if you look at it's easier to understand it via economy. So if you look at a Jhuggi Jhopadi of India, we feel that why doesn't it look like Shanghai? Why doesn't it have? The reason that it does not have fancy buildings and it doesn't look like Shanghai is because it does not have economic resources. So similarly, if you go to a desert and it looks like a desert, it doesn't look like a rainforest. So is it a poor ecology? No, it is an ecology that is completely in sync with the environmental factors around it. So when you look at designing interventions, if they are locality agnostic, then what they do is that they disrupt the complete cycle of energy transition. See, as I'm an architect, and obviously there's a strong debate, big debate going on at this point of time about IIM Ahmedabad. So what is IIM Ahmedabad? So IIM Ahmedabad stands for maybe, this entire discussion that we had. It is about designing. And why a 5,000-year-old nation suddenly at the point of being independent found itself completely, having any kind of foundation for design thinking? Why suddenly we had to look at the world? Why we had to import people? For 5,000 years, we made some of the greatest buildings on this planet. And suddenly when we needed to make an institution, we needed to import somebody. And that somebody came from a completely different kind of environmental condition. I love to call it Indiana Jones design, because if you look at the Indiana Jones franchise movies, they're very absurd representations of these great civilizations by a white man. So if you look at a building like IIM Ahmedabad, it's an absurd representation of the architectural styles that Khan saw across India. He saw some forts and he saw some ramparts and he picked up visual themes. And he thought that, he had this very simplistic idea of physics. So he thought that I'll make fat walls and they will prevent the, and when you look at it today, that design thinking is completely absurd and unlocal, because the same way these large fat walls disallow heat to come in. When the heat comes in, it can't escape. And so all the IMA residential buildings which are occupied in the night, they become ovens. So they are absolutely like brick ovens. And that has happened because we had a climate agnostic designer coming in from an alien culture. He becomes a peer for Indian architecture, and you see a whole gamut of, Indian architecture currently is maybe the most absurd architecture that you would see on this entire planet, because we have developed a great resistance to consider our local wisdom to be worthy of anything. In fact, we have trained to develop strong disdain for anything Indian today, and that is why we have a completely different design language and design vocabulary, and one thing about designing is that it's a social phenomena. So if something is proclaimed good by elites, then it enters the system, and then you're designing like architecture. We have seen this phenomenon unfolding at a very large scale, at trans-India scale. We have design that is climate agnostic. Now, the theme this week is about toy designing. So, I would like to, because architectural design is maybe a bit macro and it has got other connotations which are socio-cultural. But I would now like to focus on toy designing. So, what is toy? I'm sure that these 3 days this issue has been debated a lot, and I'm sure I would bring it to a very, very simplistic, reduce it to simplistic level. It's basically a way that we adults, kind of misuse the curiosity and the desire to play that every child has to mold that child to become future ready. So toy is something that a child doesn't want toys. An adult provides toys to the child with an agenda, because we all know that this is something that we can give it to a child and he would receive it. He would learn from it. He would absorb from it. So toy design is one of the most agenda-driven activities that we adults manipulate children with, and this is where I would like to kind of connect this entire conversation I had about India. I have been politically correct, and so we talked only about the geographical and climatical dimensions of it. But from those geographical and climatic dimensions, obviously, culture had risen. A culture with some very, very unique traits, with very, very unique qualities. And where that culture looked very stupid, very, very reduced, very rudimentary, medieval. But slowly, we are now reaching a different phase in which humanity may start having, a bit of concern about what has happened in last 200 years. So, if you look at history of technology, history of science, all kind of new things happened. Humanity moved in a given direction. And you go back by those 2,000-3,000 years, humanity was not really thinking of all these technological things. So what cultures look so damp? And the most important part that I would like to point out is that we have, if you call this post-industrial revolution as a culture, that is not even infant. It has just barely lasted for 200 years. And within 200 years, we are already at a point where it just doesn't make any sense that we can continue with the same format, same culture, same idea of gratification, same future. On the other hand, these ancient civilizations like Indian civilization, 2000 years, continuous civilization. So what is the learning that you have when you look at this reality for 200 years and the reality for 2000 years? The biggest learning is design learning. What has happened in recent times is that Western civilization came out with this amazing idea of solving problems in their own way. It's slowly now appearing to be a problem. So I'll give an example from a different tangent. So you have recently we saw those locust attacks. Locusts are those grasshoppers that are flying across and they are eating, crops. And so if you look at the way locusts are responded to in Indian culture, say 500 years back, if locust attack had happened in India, farmers were supposed to catch a locust, put a nada chadi on it, do puja of it, and let it go. And when British came to India and when they saw this attack, locust attack, and they were why are they not responding to this problem? Why are not they fighting it? So they immediately started locus control. So we have two British bodies that we have inherited. One is for malaria and other is for locust. And we have this systemic processes of taking them on and putting pesticides on them and destroying them. So why one civilization thought in one way, other civilization thought in other way is now becoming apparent. Because when you have a very short span of understanding reality, when it's very short, may not really work when you have something a span of 1,000 years or 5,000 years. So, when we look at older civilizations which have lasted long, they become very critical today, because today we are talking about forming a civilization that would last for a very, very long time. I'm sure that most human beings are optimistic that now we'll be around in some form, on this planet and maybe on the other planets and then in the stellar format, because our civilization has become very technologically robust and it can take on so many challenges. But in reality, the modernization, because if I go back to the locust solution, bombarding them with pesticides, we understand that, one is that entire thing would be destroying local ecosystem. Locust would soon become, immune to whatever pesticides that we have and they will counterattack. So in reality, that problem that we have solved is actually a bigger problem. Same thing we can look at, because healthcare is maybe the modern area that we are all looking at. So in last 200 years, we developed all kind of antibiotics, surviving for next 100 years, and we are going to be starting de novo, and all the pathogens would re-evolve, and we'll have a massive crisis, biological crisis. So the reason behind all this is that we have had a very short-sighted attitude to designing, to solving problems. I call it solving problems as designing. And this is something which comes to the next part, is that when we design for Indians or when we design for any people, then this is becoming very critical, that we don't have short-sighted understanding of what it will do. If we have short-sighted understanding, then we are going to have a very, very big problem, and that problem is now becoming this design of short span. What is rising before us now, is that we have a massive technological boom, and it is transforming the way we are designing. It is transforming the way human beings are living. It is taking us into a completely different nature of reality, which is not real, but it's imaginary. We have virtual reality, we have augmented reality. These are now becoming the modern tools which will be coming into the domain of every design. And if we bring these two, it becomes very, very attractive for us, because these tools are very powerful. They have ability to overwhelm human brain because they are pressing the right buttons. So if it is very clear that if I am a commercial, if I'm giving a lecture to a commercial set of people, the toy designing future is, in all these modern technologies, we are trying to say that we'll insert technology everywhere. But if I'm talking as somebody who is a human being, somebody who is really concerned about the way the next set of toy designing takes this rise of technology and how it will be implemented. Because if it is implemented in this one domain, it can have catastrophic effects. Now I have, I guess, about 10 minutes, so I'll quickly try to make you understand how human brains work and what do you do when you give a child a physical toy and a child a virtual toy. So when you give a child a virtual toy, you are just pressing the gratification buttons in the mind of the child. There is no sensorial exploration and creation. It is more catching. The child would love to hold on to mobile for a very long time. But the reason why it is happening is that because brain is not forced to process, brain is not forced to engage. The brain is not forced to take up the task that it has to take up when it is engaging with a physical object. So we will end up creating very successful toys using this new medium. But in reality, if we allow the sensorial dimension to be lost from human being of very, very distorted nature, and that distortion could actually come in the way his brain gets programmed in the earlier part of his life. In fact, we can just slowly make this thing worse for ourselves because we will create human beings which are quasi-human beings, which have one foot in the imaginary reality than the real reality. An imaginary reality with so many handles available to control it. It is a comfortable. The whole set of addicts of augmented or virtual reality would not be able to come back to the physical reality and survive in this reality. And if that happens, that could be the greatest tragedy for humanity, not just because it will destroy us as humans, but it will also lead us to extinction. Because this planet is very real. This planet runs on biology. It has climate, it has ecosystems, it has cultures that come out of it. If they are all forgotten or they are pushed behind at a very early age, we will not be raising animals that we are. And if that happens, then our survival on this planet is absolutely certain to be not for more than 100 years. So the time has come for us to get very real. And one of the greatest place to start getting very real is toy designing. I would not like to, look at a very statutory or draconian measures, exploring new ideas and new things. But looking at the biological nature of our brain, I think it is worthwhile for humanity to start considering that human child is not exposed to virtual or augmented or say two-dimensional or three-dimensional reality through a screen in its earlier phases. So I believe that this 1 week that you spent in toy designing, one of the the directions that you must have explored is physical toys that are being designed, because you are talking about physical toys in a world where it is very easy to create augmented reality that is more recreational. But that is maybe the greatest challenge before all of us as we move into this next era. So I guess that is from my end. I hope that I've brought in the essence of the local climate and issues that India has. The cultural dimension I did not touch too much because obviously I would not like to load it in any way. But I hope that we all understand now that there is some ancient wisdom of us, and we go back to the kind of lifestyle that that humanity once evolved. In those civilizations which lasted for a very long time, if we want our civilizations to last for a very long time. So thank you. I actually wanted a Q&A session, but I don't think it is going to be time for it, so I would leave it to that. Yes, Tim.
Thank you so much, Sameer sir. I would now invite my colleague Sharmishta to give the vote of thanks. And unfortunately, we would not have time for any questions now.
Yes.
Hello, sir. So it is so kind of you that you have shared your precise, unblemished, and knowledgeable and strong opinions that gave us an insight of overall situation. On this note, I would like to say thank you on behalf of UID, Karnavati University, a heartfelt gratitude for your invaluable presence in ADW 2.0. Thank you so much, sir.
Thank you. Thank you for inviting me.